So I created a Bumble account because I feel like I have no friends. and they said, hey, if you like to share your ethnicity, um, then you can do that. You can share your ethnicity on your profile. Feel like people should express themselves in the way that they choose, if they want to express themselves in that way. So I said, okay. So I said, yeah, I would love to share my ethnicity, and I look on the options, and I'm very impressed and glad that they have a lot of options for a lot of different ethnicities all around the world, and keyword ethnicities. But then after all that, there's just the option that says white. No, they have African American, different types of American. I'm like, I saw African American. I was looking for Italian American. I didn't find, and fucking, I didn't see anything I was, okay, maybe they have Mediterranean, ethnicity. Cause that's my ethnicity, like Mediterranean, like, my ancestors were actually from the Middle East, that's why Spanish and Italian and especially Sicilian descendants like myself are more darker than other white people. Now I'm not as dark as my Sicilian grandmother is, but if you look at pictures of her, she's straight brown. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, I understand. I think it's the attempt by the company to be liberal, but have this prejudice against, white people. And I'm not saying that white people are being more oppressed. I'm not saying that at all. Okay. So don't get it confused. I'm saying that this bias in the fact that white is not an ethnicity. It's something that was engineered by a social system and that gradually assimilated more ethnicities into it, more fairer-skinned people. It's a color of your skin, not your ethnicity. So, and, my passion in this comes from the fact that, 100 years ago, my Sicilian family and my Spanish family came as poor working class people, sailed to America, to Ellis Island to work, just like Mexicans do today. And there's probably Mexicans now still, because there's Mexicans have been coming for around the same time, So there's I know for a fact there's people who are descended from Mexican immigrants, but have been in this country for generations. Same thing with us Italians. Us Italians were not seen as white when we first arrived 100 years ago, when we started coming in droves. We were seen as dirty immigrants by the racist people, just like Mexicans are seen by the racist people today. Okay, we were not accepted, and my family worked hard for many generations to produce offspring and continue their legacy until you have me and my siblings today, and we were poor in the countries we came from. I'm still poor today. I'm homeless right now, actually. And I don't think it's a huge injustice. Like, I'm not so mad. I think something needs to be done about this. Attention needs to be on this instead of so many other injustices that are happening in the world right now, especially with marginalized people, and BIPOC people, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, the oppression that they go through. And I do acknowledge, white passing people, people who would not consider themselves white. White is not my ethnicity, I have an ethnicity, a Mediterranean ethnicity. That's where my ancestry comes from. White does not tell you anything about my ethnicity or my family history. That's a label that was gradually put on us, and, the thing is that, even in Latin American countries, they have white people who are Latino, Hispanic, and it did say, I'll give credit to Bumble, it did say choose up to 5 that you feel like most apply to you. And on my documents, like where it describes my race, my ethnicity, my government recorded ethnicity that they have me in the system is Hispanic white. Okay? So you got to understand, even with that, that was something to even put us lower, you know? They call it a Spanish and Italian and Sicilians Hispanic white, you know? Like, it's like, and then they want to reduce my family history and my ethnicity and my identity now to white. And I understand that we should recognize the injustices that marginalized people face in this class society. And the fact that, you know, having fairer skin in this white patriarchal society, you know, it is a factor that can give you a systemic advantage that you may not even want to accept as a poor white person who struggled their whole life, but a poor black person who struggled their whole life, you know, might usually have it worse than you, depending on the circumstances. But generally, on a statistical scale, you know, the oppression of black people and indigenous and people of color in the United States is a real thing, you know. But the thing is, I don't think the answer to that is to continue to accept this white identity and to continue to try to force others into this white identity. I think it's good to acknowledge, if we're speaking about privilege or, you know, sociological relations, to acknowledge, you know, white people as a whole and as a sociological factor, but to point individual people out and say, you're white, you're part of that. I think that's where this conversation is very constructive. And I hope some people are listening to this right now, because I believe this is very important. I don't think you can ever sell the masses of white people on the idea that they're inherently wrong for the whiteness. And people will tell you, oh, that's not what we're saying. Regardless of how you twist the words, that's the message that people are hearing. Okay? When you force people into this label of whiteness as an individual, then that itself is oppression. Okay? The thing is, like I said, my family and a lot of other families were not treated as white people when we came here. We went through a lot, you know, and even though our society is more evolved more and more to this seeing white as anybody with lighter skin, you know, the answer is not to accept that. It's to, you know, in instances of individuals, to recognize and accept their true ethnicity and who they are as an individual. If you're speaking to an Italian American, you know, a lot of maybe progressive people who haven't, and I've made a point about this, that these white economically privileged white people, who upper middle class, rich, or even rich white kids who are educated in liberalism, you know, go so far as with this white guilt stuff, you know what I'm saying? And like basically saying like I'm not making this up, which to someone on the outside, this might sound crazy, but this is a real phenomenon where these white communists and Marxists are saying like, I don't want to lead a revolution. I'm not fit to lead a revolution. I'm not fit to be a leader. We need the black people. We need the marginalized people in charge. And it's like, if you understand what Marxism is, which if you're on the outside, you might not anyways, but it's you know, putting these people in these distinctions. If you're this, you're the, and that's what the reactionary white people have expressed to me. That is the hardest to break through. And if we can just come to this understanding, then we can really have a mass movement, because those people are never going to accept the ideology as it is now. And I'm not saying it's all wrong. You know what I'm saying? It's just the ideology is shaped over time. Okay. Right now, there's currently a collective mindset among these educated, upper class, economically privileged white leftists, and it makes the economically privileged BIPOC leftists, go along with it. Like, oh yeah, white people are so bad. But it's like poor white. I grew up in the South, okay, where it's like almost 40% black people, mostly white people, and there's Asians and Latinos and people from a lot of races, but the thing is, there's a lot more black people than some of these liberal West Coast areas. In the West Coast, there's a lot less black people, and I grew up in a neighborhood. My street was predominantly BIPOC, as you want to call it. It was mostly Asians, some black people, and my homie, one of my homies, he was Latino. Okay. My whole neighborhood around me, we are like the only white people there. You know what I'm saying? Like my friends growing up on my street that I hung out with all the time. You know what I'm saying? We understand the struggle that I go through, and none of them feel that white people are inferior. None of them have this liberal ideal that these, rich and privileged, people or people from these West Coast or wherever you're from, like we all understand each other, that we all in the struggle. You know what I'm saying? We have a mutually understood struggle in our life, and we can relate to each other as people, and we don't let race get in the way. It really does seem to me like these, I don't want to continue to say educated but it's a class thing. It's when your parents are rich, usually you go to college, you know what I'm saying? And, it seems like to be like a university for now. I've never been to university. I'm 26 years old. I've been poor my whole fucking life, homeless a lot of my adult life. You know what I'm saying? And it just seems like these rich people